Hey guys, so I'm here today with my first tutorial video for my channel, and I wanted to talk about destaining fabric. This is something that you can do with the aid of a decolorant, which will take the natural stain out of the fabric and kind of return it to its base color. You can do this to take kind of simple plain fabrics and use a stencil or even probably a stamp if you wanted to add your own flair to fabric, and then you can kind of do whatever you want. I use my fabric to make journal covers for mixed media journals, but you could use it for any need that you have for fabric. So I will go through the process and the do's and don'ts that I definitely learned throughout the process, and therefore you can learn how to do it, and it will be a lot more efficient for you after learning from my mistakes. Don't forget, it's a beautiful day to make art, and enjoy the video. Thank you. All right, so the first thing I will go through is what supplies I'm using. I will also be providing some links on how you can get some of these. So to stain or destain our fabric, I'm using this Decolourant. You can find this on Amazon. It's very simple to use. You can apply it with a brush, a stamp, a sponge. You can use a stencil, and you'll see how it works, but we're gonna use a stencil for this, and then we're gonna let it dry, and I'm gonna try using my steamer, but it also says you can use an iron with steam or even a heat gun, which works, it says, especially if the print is still damp. And then after, it says to kind of wash it with a mild detergent to return the fabric to its natural softness. So this is the stainer that I'm gonna be using to get rid of the ink, the ink on the fabric. The fabric that I have is just black linen. I also got this off of Amazon because it's just easy. It came in a big piece. I've already cut this down to the size that I know that I need, a 10 by 10.5 size piece. And then I'm going to be using this stencil. This is a Robyn McClendon scripting stencil. It's the larger size, 8 by 10, and you can get this on iStencil. I love Robyn stuff. This whole video is actually based on a technique that I learned from Robyn and the 52-week challenge that I'm currently doing with a fun little jelly Junka Dory journal. Okay, so now I have my stencil kind of where I want it on the page. I'm actually gonna go ahead and kind of tape it down a little bit because if you're like me, I kind of not the best with stencils. And I've noticed that taping it down helps keep it a little bit flat so that I don't get the blurred edges. And I'm just using simple painter's tape. I love painter's tape because it won't hurt anything that you're working, and you can kind of use the little pieces. I kind of keep them around and use them multiple times. And then I forgot to mention, I'm just going to be using a standard little cheapo from the dollar store sponge brush. So open this and just gonna grab some and start dabbing. I try to hold the stencil too in the area that I'm working on, hoping that that will help with the clean edges. Kind of going over the area a little, kind of twice, just to make sure that I've got enough of the decolorant. It doesn't take much, and if you use too much, then you will get blurred edges. So it's kind of a fine line, and I'm not going to say I'm perfect at it. The more you do it, the better you'll get. Using stencils and figuring out how much you need and want. And every stencil is different. when they have fine lines, it can be harder. They have big pieces, it can be harder. My favorite are stencils that kind of in the medium range of detail. I seem to get the best results with those type of stencils. I don't always clean my stencils when I'm using them with acrylic paint. Sometimes I do. I have a little very thin container that I'll put them in right after I use with a layer of water and soap and clean them off in there, and then I let that acrylic kind of dirty water dry, and then I scrape it up so I don't pour any of that into the sink. But sometimes I don't. It depends on how much I have on stencil. With this stuff though, I'll take it off and I'll go to another clean area and wipe it off with a baby wipe. Right, so I'm going to take the stencil off gently if I can. You can see in just a second you'll be able to see the decolorant on there, and some of it got a little thicker than others, which I think will probably change how it dries and make it look fun. So I'm going to clean my stencil and I'm going to let this dry, and then after it is dry I will come back with my steamer and we will see what it does. Alright, so I washed my stencil, and while this is continuing to dry, I'm actually just going to make some marks here with my sponge, just little rectangle marks. Maybe some little lines. Hopefully this will just provide a little fun grunge. All right, now we're really gonna let it dry. Okay, so we're back. It's not completely dry, but I'm quite impatient, so I'm just gonna try it out. I have my little mini Joy steamer here, and I'm just going to test it out and see how it does. If it doesn't work, then I didn't think I had an iron, but looking for my steamer, I actually discovered I had an iron. Don't know that it's working super well. I'm mostly just getting water all over the place. So I think I will. It might have worked better if I tried to hold it up. I guess I can try that. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna let this dry probably overnight because it's getting late, and I will iron it in the morning. All right, so I remembered it said if it was damp, using a heat gun might be helpful. So I was afraid that if it was too damp, it might, I don't know, get rid of some of the decolorant. So now I'm gonna try the heat gun because that's what I'm here for, to try things, see what works best, and then let you know so you don't have to try it all. All right, so I left this overnight. There are a bunch of splotches from the steamer. I have my iron that I've actually never used before. I bought it like 6 years ago. And I didn't even think I had an iron until I was looking for my steamer and I found this as well. So I have it on the Lenning setting and we're gonna see if this works. If not, I'm gonna have to try it again. It does smell a little bit, just FYI. And you can obviously tell it's decoloring, but don't know if it worked out exactly the way I want it. All right, so in my quest to figure this out, I have now taken an old pair of linen pants that are too big for me now, and not really worth reselling, and tore it up. Got some cool frayed edges from tearing it, and I'm gonna try this and see if this works better. I've also been kind of like dabbing a little harder to see if that helps it soak in. Any better, since I seem to get blurred edges when I heat it, even when I feel like it's dry, and even when the edges are nice and crisp when I take the stencil off and when it dries. My theory is it has something to do with the heat, and I'm still not letting it dry enough. I don't know. Maybe I'll try the heat gun with this one, see if it does any better. Maybe like a top layer with the heat gun. Oops, this is a little messed up right there. Try to be careful, not get it on your hands. Does kind of warn against extended exposure to skin. And when I first did it and I got a little bit on my skin, I feel like it might have burned a little bit. So learn from me. Wear gloves. I don't have any gloves, so I'm not doing it. Should probably get a pair of gloves. Wear gloves. Try not to get it on you. So I have a pocket that I'm intentionally keeping because I plan on using this as a fabric cover for my junk journal that I'm doing this year. And so it's not super flat right here, so I'm gonna have to already break my own rule and touch some of it real quick. Rub it off. You can see on the other side, like the stencil is nice and crisp. I think you should be able to tell. Yeah, you can see it. But it's just not coming out right when I heat it. Oh, that's gonna be blurry. That's okay. It's all right if a little bit of it's blurry, but we'll see when I show you the fails that it's too blurry. Those pieces are also currently in the dryer. So if you hear the background noise of the dryer, I'm sorry. And it also, when I washed it, which was recommended to do, some of the color, it definitely washed away. So that is why my current theory is that maybe I'm not getting it hot enough. All right, so it got a little goopier on the right side because of the fabric not being flat there. So definitely recommend getting your fabric flat. This is actually already drying a lot better than anticipated, but I am going to let this dry for forever. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This morning when I tried attempt number 2, I let it dry for like, I don't know, I feel like 4 hours. No, even longer, 6. And something, I don't know, something with the iron, just it still didn't get hot enough. So we're gonna let this dry, maybe possibly even until tomorrow, and try again. All right, see ya in a bit. Okay, so this looks pretty dry. I'm going to attempt again and see how it turns out. Okay, so I just tried it with a really dry piece of fabric, the black fabric, and it was looking good, and I had made a couple passes, and then I put the steam on, and then it started to blur. So my biggest theory now is the steam is making the stencil blur, so I'm just going to do this one with no steam. Also, I don't have an ironing board because I don't iron, so that's why I'm doing it without it. This spot is gonna be bad. I don't really care. Just gonna clean my iron a little bit. Not exactly the color I would have hoped for, but you know, maybe I'll find a fun use for it. That's the fun part about junk journaling, is you throw it in a box and maybe one day you find a use for it. All right, so fifth time is the charm. No stain. The funniest thing is I was thinking I should have just painted this white. It would have been a lot easier for me and a lot less wasted time, but you can learn from my mistakes. You can see the color change and kind of tell it goes from like that rust color to a more, I don't know, some weird gray color. I want it to get pretty hot because I noticed on the first round that I washed, when I washed it, it was even lighter than this. And I can't remember if I said earlier, but in case I didn't, right now this is linen fabric, so I am using the iron on the linen setting. Again, I don't have an ironing board. I'm sure most of you do. I never iron. I live in a one-bedroom apartment, so I just didn't feel like it was necessary. But iron at your own risk without an ironing board. I seem to be okay, but I have a little piece of glassine paper that I actually use for like everything underneath all of when I'm doing my projects. And it seems to be okay, but I'm being very cognizant that it's not getting too hot. I don't want to mess my desk up. So proceed at your own risk if you don't use an ironing board. Do as I say, not as I do. So, not using the steam was definitely the winner. This one here got a little bit blurry. I think I probably got a little bit heavy-handed with the paste. That's another thing I learned. Less is definitely more. But that's okay. I made this sheet a lot bigger than I plan on using. I only need like a 10 by 11 piece to be my fabric cover. So I will probably end up using, looks like the middle piece turned out the best. So I will probably cut around the middle. And then I can use the other for scraps sometimes. Even though this isn't the color that I wanted, I was hoping that it would be white. It'll still be cool. It'll kind of still give the look that I'm looking for. And my fabric cover, this is going to be the inside of it, I believe. And, you know, you'll see every fabric is going to be different. You saw the blue linen I had turned out orange. Quite interesting. I've seen someone else do it and they had black linen and it was white. So it's all highly dependent on the fabric that you're using. And it's a little bit like a box of chocolates. Don't know what you're gonna get until it's done. So I'm super happy with that middle part. The stencil is looking quite crisp over there. So I've been ironing for a while, like over 5 minutes. Just slowly going through and making sure that all the paste has been dried up. And we're done. All right, so I'm back. I ended up doing 5 total pieces, and I just wanted to go through them quickly and show you guys all what I did wrong and how to fix it. So this was the very first try. All of this blurriness, and this wasn't part of the stencil, this was just mark making, so you know, it's not as bad. But this was the stencil, it got very blurred. This was because I put steam on it right away. I tried it with my steamer, and it just wet the paste, even though the paste seemed to be dry, and just created this. So that was take number 1, which was no fun. So then I tried it again, and it almost seemed to be worse. I use just the iron this time, but I used some steam with the iron. Still hadn't really quite figured out that the steam was what was causing the problem. Though I love this circle. Like I could just cut this out and make a collage out of that, or put that on a collage, because that circle looks awesome. The rest of it, not so much. So by then I started to realize I thought it was the steam. So I did another one, cool circle still, and you know, like I was saying before, I wasn't putting too much paste. Like the lines were crisp when I took the stencil off and when it dried. And here I was just ironing, and so you can see it came out well. And then I said, okay, well, I've ironed it a little bit. I want to put some steam on it because that supposedly makes it a little more decolored. But then you'll see in the video where it just rapidly went from being crisp to not being crisp. Though again, I could still probably have some fun with this as collage elements. So that's when I was like, okay, no more steam, stop using steam. So next I have the piece of blue linen pants that I tore, and I did the stencil twice, and I got a little heavy-handed with the paste here, and it wasn't as dry when I did it, but like this is really cool, this is really cool, this still looks really good, so I could cut this in half and use part of this as a journal cover eventually, even though right now I'm not working with blue, I'm working with black. And then use this as collage elements, who knows. But I did not use any steam on this. I just ironed it, and I ironed it a couple times, or for a couple minutes in succession. And you can see that this turned out much crisper than the ones before. So last but not least, I said, okay, I'm gonna try one more time with the black linen, because that's what I want to use for my journal cover. And I made a big piece. I would recommend making a piece definitely slightly bigger, because even if you wash it on cold, don't dry it that well, and like use a low setting on the drying. I did still get some shrinkage of the fabric, so this is the one that turned out the best. These middle kind of rows look absolutely awesome, as do these two. So I'll probably I need like a 10 by 11 size piece of fabric, so I'll probably cut this out and use this as the inside cover to my fabric cover. And I only ironed this, you saw I ironed it for about 5 minutes to make sure that the decolorant was really staining as much. I don't exactly know why this was a little smudgier here. I think this might have gotten a little bit more paste and probably wasn't as dry as these were when I did this, and so it smudged. And so all of these have now actually been washed on cold cycle with like very minimal detergent, no fabric softener, and then dried on a low setting. Gets the smell away and is now ready to be used in the fabric. I don't mind that the linen got frayed. I actually will use that to my advantage in the book cover. And you know, this didn't turn out white like I wanted it to, but it's still kind of a cool color that I think will still go with the theme of the journal that I've been working in. So overall, I'm pretty happy. Alright guys, so We have now gone through the entire process of the fabric destainer, and I learned a lot along the way, and I hope you did too if you watched the whole video. The biggest lesson that I learned was to just stay away from the steam. Every time I tried steam in whatever capacity, with the steamer or the steam setting on the iron, or even ironing and then steaming, it just didn't work. So I would say that was definitely the biggest takeaway. Just use your iron, iron it for a good solid 5 minutes, just to really make sure that you have taken away the stain. And then another thing that I learned is don't be impatient. I'm definitely impatient. So just let it dry. And if you dab and use less is more, it's gonna dry much quicker. The first one I did took hours to dry, but as I got better and was dabbing more to like make sure it really got into the fabric and using less of the paste, it dried much faster, and then I was able to kind of move on. And so I would say those were really the biggest two takeaways. You will see right before this, there's kind of the other small tips and tricks that I learned, but those are the big takeaways. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button and remember to subscribe for updates on future videos. And thank you and have a good day. With love, by Sarah.